The second time around is when I was really depressed. It was very hard for me. And also because I knew what was going to happen. I knew the chemo. I knew what I was going to start feeling. And it wasn't until later that I understood that before a transplant, you get like the atomic bomb of chemos. One of the PAs described it to me that usually it's like you're a tree. And when you have chemo, it's like you chop off the tree, but the trunk is still there. But with transplant, they want to take the tree out from the root. So they have to like completely annihilate everything. And of course that is pretty much what I felt in my spiritual, my mental, my physical, everything. And since I was in the hospital longer, a lot more things happened, a lot more times that I almost thought I wouldn't make it. It was a lot harder, like I think 10 times harder than the first time. And that's when after my transplant and after treatment, I was in the hospital for 30 something days. What after I got out is when I fell into a deep depression. And there's a lot of reasons. So when I had chemo and I had full body irradiation, my skin actually burned and I would have extreme pain. So I got lots and lots of Dilaudid, which is a very powerful opioid. And I even had like a little switch where I could, get more. And so I would get high amounts of it, right? Because I needed it. But when I got out of the hospital to just go every day for transfusions and things like that, of course I became addicted. It was 2011, 2012 at the time. And so the opioid crisis was in full swing. And so now in retrospect, I realized that my body became dependent of it. But I went into depression, especially towards the end of my treatment when I was recovering, because I started thinking, I think it's kind of what postpartum depression feels like, where I actually felt that me being on earth would cause more harm to my children and my husband than being alive, right? And so that's the time when I was going to a psychiatrist at MD Anderson. They have specific psychiatrists for cancer survivors, and they were giving me all these medication, benzodiazepams, just trying to figure out how to help my mental state. But I think it also, sorry if I'm jumping around because I'm remembering these things. So after the Dilaudid and I came home, they gave me pills, but it's not the same as intravenous. So now I understand there was withdrawal, so I wouldn't sleep. And at one time I didn't sleep for 3 days. And I became also almost like psychotic. At least that's what the psychiatrist saw. And that's why I had like emergency kind of psychiatry and all that stuff. So they would give me different medications. So then I knew that whenever I would get the pain medicine when I was in the hospital and I was just completely exhausted and completely overwhelmed with pain, I knew that that medication, Dilaudid, would be something that would give me a break. And not just a break from my pain, but a break from my mental strain. And so, of course, now that I'm having all these benzodiazepams and opioids, I had many. And so that's when I started overdosing. And it was hard because I got judged a lot. Like, you had a successful transplant. Why are you doing this? How could you do this to your kids? But now I'm able to articulate better that when you're in that state of mind, having huge financial debt, the transplant itself with the cord blood and everything was $1 million package. And I had Cobra. And the first time I got sick, it was $800 a month plus a $10,000 deductible. The second time it was $1,000 a month. And if it wasn't for my family contributing, I wouldn't be able to get the treatment. Yeah. So that, yes. And I think that's what women feel with postpartum depression. I mean, it's very real because you actually do believe that. And so after overdosing 3 times, I actually went to the hospital. Then, they were able to take away all the medications. And so then I became almost like it got worse. I mean, not that the taking the medication was helpful, but it actually got worse in my pursuit of in my way, mending what I had done. Like I had put my family through this. And so the last time I tried to take, in my life, I actually, my baby, my youngest was 2 years old and my oldest was in school. And so I would usually pick him up from school. But what I did that day is I just felt like, okay, I'm done. I don't know what, it was just, everything just seemed like closing in. So I went to go drop off my son at my mom's house. And thankfully, my aunt looked at me like something was wrong and actually told my mom. But I went back home and I turned on, the garage was closed and I turned on the car and I was just happy. I was elated, you know, trying to end my life because I thought I was doing the best thing. But then, and so what happened, what changed everything is I thought, my son is going to get out of school and I'm not going to be there. And I started thinking like, it's going to cause him trauma that every time somebody's late. Yes. Yeah. So I thought about that because I knew he was waiting. I had to pick him up. And so I said, I'm going to cause my son to have trauma that anytime somebody's late, he's going to think somebody died because his mother died. And that was the moment that I said, okay, I can't do this. Now that's when everything just turned on. And I realized like, it's better for me to be with my kids. Like I was able to kind of get rid of that thinking. And that's when things started to change. And that's when I started, kind of going back and to the things that I love, kind of seeing my life outside of cancer, outside of the illness, outside of all of this. And that's when my road to recovery started. And also, I think as a child with trauma, for me to do that to my children, I couldn't do it. So I think that helped me with what I went through as a child, how hard it was. And I think that's what kind of opened my eyes is I was able to see what my son's future would look like. Yeah, so I had at the time, Facebook had like notes and I had a lot of people from college that I knew. I would write like a little blog and it was really helpful to kind of be able to articulate what it felt like in different times of the cancer journey. And so I was able to kind of compile all of those, journal entries and make it into like a little book for my sons. And that was helpful for me because whenever I write something and I put it on paper, it's like I'm able to like have it where it kind of comes out and it's no longer, asphyxiating me or something. It was just like kind of like a thing where I'm able to pour out. And also writing all my life, and I forgot to say this before, my therapist when I was 10 years old, she's the one that introduced me to journaling. And she's the one that told me that journaling is helpful whenever you're stressed or anxiety or depressed. And when you write it down, that it's actually more manageable. You don't see it as such catastrophic. And so when I was trying to recover from, the second bout with cancer, that really helped me to put it into words and validate how I felt, but also know that I can move on. I can rise up from it. Out of all the aspects in my life that were affected, I think the most difficult one that I recently kind of overcame, I guess you can say, is career. So as a very high achieving person that I was, overachiever, having not being able to start a career was very difficult. And I went back to teaching and I got burned out and I didn't know what to do. So that was very hard on my self-worth, is that I guess my grandfather's words, so much intelligence gone to waste. That was something that was haunting me. Yeah. And so I knew I couldn't be a teacher because I didn't have the mental capacity for it because I burned out. So me trying to find a new career path was very difficult. But I think along the way, I've understood that it wasn't like when you go through something, you don't, your values, you as a human being does not change. So if you have a talent for public speaking or if you have a talent for drawing, like no matter what happens, you will always come back to it. And I think that's what helped me understand that no matter if I had a career, in my view, a career, like I was still good at writing. I started a blog with my friend and I would do like different digital ads on Twitter. Like, I guess it helped me see that I'm more than just a job. I'm a person with multiple talents, and I always thought I had to monetize it, but I realized that that's fun for me to learn, and I actually want to make it a research memoir. And so I'm thinking what I'm going to do is write about every aspect of me, a career, family, intimacy, and then kind of bring in what other young adults are going through, what policies are being put into place, things like that, to kind of make it to where you learn about young adult cancer survivorship through my story, but there's more to it. Well, during the pandemic is when, Zoom became something that there's a lot of bad things that came from COVID or things that weren't that great, but one of the best things is the connection through Zoom. So a lot of these cancer organizations that are specific to young adults were able to broaden their resources to more people around the country. And I was able to be part of Grit Health, and I was part of their mental health council. I was able to do Cactus Cancer. I was able to try like all these different organizations. So I was able to talk to and be in support groups with other young adult survivors. And I noticed that a lot of the things that I was feeling or that I was going through was very similar to them. But I also understood the privilege that I had, because when I would talk about my cancer, like survivorship clinic in MD Anderson, I would hear some of them say, I wish I had that. I wish I had that. And so I understood my privilege. And so I felt like because of that privilege, I think my job is to help make survivorship care available and accessible to everyone. So that was really what started, is just listening to other cancer survivors, young adult cancer survivors, and seeing how we have a um, different issues that we deal with because we're so young and we still have a full life ahead of us. And so that's when my advocacy was really, I was inspired by hearing other people's issues with dating or issues. And so that's what started me going. And yeah. And also, one thing that I learned during my cancer journey is I remember a friend of mine came to visit me and she had just lost her job. And a lot of times when I had friends come over, visit me in the hospital, they're like, I don't want to bore you with my insignificant problems, because you're dealing with this. But I remember my friend, when she lost her job, she was talking about how she felt, and it felt exactly the way I felt. And that opened my eyes with loss is loss, no matter how you experience it. And so that's also another reason why I thought, well, even if I share my story, it won't just affect people with cancer, but also beyond, because loss is loss is loss. And we can connect through that and help each other as a community. So my goal is to bring people together, even if they have different experiences, but also to form communities. And also, like, I've been able to talk a lot about toxic positivity, which is something that a lot of cancer patients deal with. But I think a lot of other people with chronic illness or different health issues deal with, right? Oh, you're so amazing. You're such an inspiration. And so I feel like now that I have more conversations and they ask me, well, what do you say? And I finally said, if they're angry because they had cancer, validate it. They're sad. They feel, because I said all those feelings are real, even if you survive cancer. Those feelings are real. And I think it's having more compassion. And even though you don't directly understand it, you still validate it. And that's another thing that I try to tell people, that if you see a cancer survivor and they're angry at the fact that they had cancer, allow them to be angry. And also, I will say this. I've actually I've realized that other cancer survivors feel the same way, where now I know how to set boundaries. I know how to say no. Maybe also because I'm 41, but I've been able to be more fulfilled in my life because now I understand that I can say no. Like being nice doesn't really mean always doing people pleasing. So that also has changed because since I feel like I don't have time to waste. Like I need this promotion. If you can't give it to me, I'll start looking for another job. So that's what I did. I actually have a new job coming up. I'm going to start in September because it has a better shift, better pay, and I get to work from home. And so even though cord blood collecting is very near and dear to my heart, like I feel like I'm worth moving on. And so that has been very liberating too. And I feel like a lot of other cancer survivors feel the same way. Like I don't have time to waste. I gotta move on. I gotta, do something different. And so that's been it's been awesome. Thank you. Thank you.